Can't say I remember No Attin is my favorite episode of Skeleton Crew so far. I really liked the first 3 episodes. I feel like I didn't make that clear in my review for episode 3, but episode 4 is like exactly the kind of episode I love to see. We got a new adventure on a new-ish planet that raised new questions while also providing some solutions for our heroes, and we got some solid character development for every character. But the focus was definitely on Neel, which was a joy. And it was all wrapped up in a great Star Wars-y bow. I thought it was great, so let's dive into this episode scene by scene. Right away, the Onyx Cinder arrives at a nice-looking planet surrounded by a green nebula with some strange-looking satellites scattered about. It kinda had me convinced they truly made it home in only 4 episodes, but since we know this is a different planet, I'm gonna speculate a bit. I think those broken down satellites are the red lights you can see in Attin's barrier at night. I've been guessing the barrier is some sort of artificially made nebula or protective substance that keeps the planet hidden. Maybe some or all of the satellites around Atakan have stopped working, and that's why the barrier is only partially there. Whatever the case, I like that the kids can't really know that it's not their home because they've never seen it from space. Wim is unhappy to be ending his adventure so soon. I think he had fun blasting Kim's goons, aka X-Wing pilots, last week, but that's a perfect way to set up his journey for this week, because things get way more intense for all of them. The ship gets pulled into an autopilot sequence, which is strange, and it's not really addressed again. The kids don't know if it's normal, and Jod definitely thinks it's abnormal. There are a lot of mysteries surrounding Atakan that I think we might address later in the series, but for now I loved the introduction to this new planet because it had me asking myself a ton of questions. I was wondering if maybe this was Attin, but everything outside of their little city had fallen completely into ruin and stuff like that. I loved how this opening kept me completely on my toes. The abandoned playground was spooky, and it was so cool seeing the ruins of the old suburban houses. I know I've said that's not really my Star Wars vibe in previous episodes, but first of all, I am over that. It's not truly detracting from the story for me. But second, not only does it have good thematic meaning for these kids to come from the suburbs, but it's also such a distinct look within Star Wars that when you see it in ruins, it's unmistakable and raises even more questions. Meanwhile, Fern makes Jod stay on the ship with SM-33, and whoever programmed him to be a babysitter is hilarious. I genuinely can't tell if 33 knows he's being that funny. Like, is he trying to be all sassy, or does he just want to protect sweet little baby Jod? The droid pirate nanny catches his baby snooping around in the kids' stuff, which is fun. It looks like there's a space Rubik's Cube in there, a recorder or instrument of some kind, and a holo of the holiday special again that I was kinda hoping Jod would recognize and say he loved. But most importantly, he finds Wim's credits. Once Jod convinces 33 not to kill him again, he finds out the planet they're on is Atakan and thinks he can help him remember where Attin is. The title of this episode and 33's repeated use of the phrase had me psyched we would learn at least a little more about his history, and I'm glad that's what we got. I think this series is doing a great job so far at teasing out the mystery, giving us breadcrumbs without giving it all away. And also the puppet work and effects for 33 are just so great, like the smoke coming out of his head when he's trying to remember things. But before he and Jod can step off the ship, they're captured by the Attin. Jod's, "You know what, just shoot me," was a great laugh, but I'm also a little suspicious of this interaction. I'll come back to that later. The kids find a statue of a man Wim names King No-Head. This is another Atakan mystery that seems kind of important, even though they don't spend a lot of time on it. I wonder if this is a statue of the original supervisor of the Jewels of the Old Republic or something like that. Or maybe it was just there to set up the surprising attack. The conflict between the Troik and the Attin reminds me of the Obi-Wan and Anakin comic by Charles Soule, where the two Jedi wind up trying to resolve another generational conflict on another isolated planet, which is fun, but I think this is the perfect kind of adventure for Wim, Fern, Neel, and KB to experience. They're enlisted as soldiers, and most of them kinda seem like they're enjoying shooting and basically playing pretend, but Neel isn't interested because he's sweet and pure and perfect. He sees where the Troik live on the rooftops, and I want to point out that I see humans, Ithorians, Rhodians, and Vazuan, all the same species we see on Attin, but none of Neel's species, which is interesting. Anyway, back to the important things. Neel has a talk with the young Troik girl, Haina, who talks about how they plan to attack the Attin, who stole their Eopes. They'll get their revenge and then some, and prove this generation isn't weaker than the last. But Neel sees some hungry kids and offers them food. The same Neel whose stomach was growling last episode. And yes, he has probably eaten more recently, but still. This seems like the kind of place where only the strong survive. Children are not treated as people who need help, they're treated as soldiers, and if they fall behind, oh well. Strength is valued above all else, but Neel shows kindness that Hannah probably hasn't seen in a while. So she shows Neel the giant gun on the roof, which was admittedly hilarious. Neel points out how unfair it is that the children of Atakan have to fight, and that's why the fact that our heroes are seeing all of this on a mirror version of their own planet is perfect. They see that war and violence can find you wherever you are. They see that they were just straight up lucky to be born on the right planet. Neel and the others have grown up in the space suburbs, literally in a protected bubble. They have no idea what other planets are like. They have no idea there have been at least 2 galactic-scale wars that they've been shielded from. As someone who grew up in a suburban bubble, I know how easy it is to start thinking everyone's lives are like your life, but then you take your first steps into a larger world and you realize your life experiences are not universal. It's a simple truth, but one we all have to go through. Wim, Fern, Neel, and KB all get to go to school and learn some intense math, and I still think there's something shady about all of that, but it's better than going to school to learn to fight because you have to survive. I think this is a good wake-up call for Wim especially. He craves adventure and excitement, and he goes looking for it, and he makes it happen. He forces adventure on his best friend who just wants to go home. Maybe he's bored at home at Attin, but there are kids out there who would love to have a boring day. Kids who would love to be able to act like kids. Instead, Hannah and the others are raised to know only conflict with this other group, and we don't even know why they hate each other. It kinda reminds me of the episode of Avatar where Aang has to make the Ganjin and the Zhang tribes get along. They had a generational hatred of one another because of a small misunderstanding 100 years ago, and everyone just dug their heels in instead of saying they were sorry. Not that every conflict can be resolved so easily, but if some Troik or Attin at some point had been willing to make peace, then they wouldn't have to raise their children as warriors. That's what Neel says he would do anyway, just say he was sorry, which is simplistic of course, but he just doesn't want people to hurt one another. And he thinks he's like that because he's just too scared to fight, and I want to grab him by his cute little blue face and shake him and tell him to never grow up and to stay exactly like he is forever because he's not too scared, he is the bravest boy. Back inside, KB shoots a bunch of cans like a pro, and Wim seemingly gives her her first high five, which was delightful. The first 3 episodes moved so fast, we haven't had a ton of time to just let these kids hang out with one another and bond as a team. But that little celebration is short-lived because, of course, Wim takes the biggest blaster, cranks it all the way up, and throws himself back with the recoil, which General Strix takes to mean that they're all ready to lead them in battle. Strix is kind of a weird character because he doesn't seem evil, but I do think he is using the kids as cannon fodder. Like, I don't think it's something he wants to do, but a few extra soldiers that aren't his daughter fell into his lap, so why not treat them like pawns? But then when Neel hesitates, Hannah joins them, and Strix does not seem happy about that. While Neel is terrified but still pressing forward, he walks back what he said before about being too scared, and realizes it's braver to make peace than to continue fighting. And fortunately, he doesn't have to because Jod conveniently saves the day. He walks out of the mist with the stolen Eopes he apparently bought back from the Attin with Wim's credits, which I'm not sure I completely buy. SM33 did mention a tower to Jod, so I wonder if they were just looking for the supposed fallen sanctum and just happened upon the kids. And then Jod decided to pretend to be more heroic than he actually was. Maybe he is fully telling the truth, I just don't trust the guy yet. It was a strange jump from, oh, just shoot me, to bargaining for the Eopes. I kinda wonder if he actually killed all the Attin. I just feel like there's something weird going on here. And speaking of weird things, both the Troik and the Attin seem like they have some Imperial gear. Those helmets look like something Mud Troopers or General Veers would wear. Add that to the mystery pile, I guess. I love that Neel invites Hannah to come with them because his house has plenty of room. He is just the nicest kid, but it's not as simple as that. Not everyone can just leave the life they've always known, their friends and their families. But Neel's kindness and example might just save Atakan one day. And then she kisses him and does a flip off a rock just to stunt. Baller move. Up in the Fallen Sanctum, or the mirror version of the Supervisor's Tower, we get to learn the names of several other jewels of the Old Republic, and we learn that SM-33 destroyed the coordinates to Atakan the last time he was here. Women Fern seen together is another great example of just taking some time to let these kids bond. Fern is always so stern and cold, but lets herself be vulnerable in front of the kid she is most annoyed with, and he admits how much he looks up to her. I love little moments like these. Honestly, with just about any new show, it does take me a few episodes to get into a groove with it. The kids were just meeting one another in the first 3, and everything was happening so fast, they haven't been given a second to catch their breath and actually become friends. And Jod wasn't part of the team until episode 3 either, but now he's starting to vibe with the rest of the characters too. Now that the whole cast is a somewhat functioning team on a mission, I find myself more settled into the series as a whole. The final moments of the episode were rad and just an excellent culmination of solid writing. Fern realizes SM-33 remembers Attin, he just literally can't say he remembers. And she knows because we saw her override her own droid's memory. That was great. So 33's old captain found out where Attin was on Atakan, destroyed the coordinates that led there, killed anyone else who knew where it was, erased it from 33's memory, and then told him to kill anyone who ever came looking. Which was just scary enough for a show like this to still give Neel his big hero moment, and yet another wonderful Neel scream, and then a Neel faint, which was adorable. Robert Timothy Smith killed it this entire episode. So I'm guessing next week the kids will have to find a way into SM-33's memory, or maybe figure out how to wake him up without letting him rip them apart. I love that we're finding our way back to Attin, but it's not just a straightforward map or something. Kim basically gave them a list of planets, which led them to finding out the coordinates are in their droid, and now they have to solve this next puzzle. Each problem is unique, and that is so fun. I will point out the next 2 weeks are going to be kind of interesting covering this show. The next episode comes out on Christmas Eve, so I don't know when we're going to get the review and after show out. Maybe Wednesday for the review, or maybe Thursday or Friday. We're planning on the after show being on Thursday. Episode 6 is on New Year's Eve, and we'll be hosting a party that night, so same thing. We probably won't be reviewing or discussing the episode until January 2nd, so I'm just trying to give everyone a heads up. But that's it for this episode. I thought it was great. I love Neel even more, and I didn't think that was possible. Let me know what you thought of it in the comments. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel to keep up with all our Skeleton Crew coverage, follow us on our socials, and consider checking out our Patreon page, where we've got episode reactions and watch-alongs. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.